For most of us, nature is something we experience during fleeting moments spent in the great outdoors. For Narayan, a poet and close observer of nature, our encounters with natural systems are windows into the soul. They reveal a beautiful, wild, and mysterious world that exists beyond our thought and imagination, a living world of interdependent beings that challenges many of our notions of self, security, and spirituality.
Young people now are greatly more indoors oriented than even when I was growing up. And I grew up in a town. I didn't grow up way out on a ranch or a farm, as very, very few Americans do these days, as you know. It used to be 90%, now it's maybe 2%. So the challenge for you, if you were interested in the environment, is to cultivate a relationship with the outdoors, wherever you are. And I've gone through that process myself, as I said, growing up, in a town, my head full of books, and I knew lots of other people whose heads were also getting filled up with books. I'm a writer myself, so it's not as if I'm about to say something against books. On the other hand, in the indoor civilization, we have domesticated ourselves and cut ourselves off from what is natural. In fact, cut ourselves off from our own bodies, which is part of the natural. Everything is nature, in fact, except our own thought structures. And in the domesticated civilization, the only thing that matters is our own thought structures, lo and behold. So here we have a bunch of shimmering aspens in this little grove that I've called home at times each summer the last number of years. And these aspens do not quake because I think they should. They are not part of my thought structure. And regardless of what I think about them or even feel in response to them, they're in their own world. They live out their own lives. And so this is what we mean by your relationship with nature and with what's natural, including your own body, that we have to discover the world that is unthought by human beings. There is an entire universe which our thought is not in control of, and therefore we get disappointed or fearful. And we say, why did somebody not make me secure? Security is our thought. The structure of our thought is security. And the structure of our thought is an extremely tiny matter when you look up and see how immense the universe is. That's the reason to be interested in the environment. You yourself are part of that, and you yourself, apart from that, are extremely small. Therefore, to learn what's big and bigger and biggest, and bigger than biggest, seems to me the obvious way to spend one's life. That's what I'm doing. John Muir was actually a religious philosopher. He was a botanist, yeah, he was a geologist, yeah, amateur basically, which doesn't mean that he didn't know a lot about it. He did, but what he really was a religious philosopher. And he had been raised in an extremely strict Calvinist circumstance and experienced up close from his father the strengths and glaring hypocrisies of a system in which, you know, there's a heaven for the elect and a hell for everybody else, and basically the hell is for everybody who does things other than the way the preacher would do things. Muir walked away from that finally in his mid-20s. And he did not, as so many in Anglo-American culture of the last 400 years, he did not struggle to revise and expand and discard and recreate a religious framework similar to what he had inherited. He simply started walking from Wisconsin. He walked all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. In the course of those 1,000 miles, the religious structure which was imposed on him disappeared. I mean, he disappeared it. And he was then left, when he came to California, with a free gaze. He looks up, he sees the immensity, he goes to a place like Yosemite. This is the cathedral. But Muir was not using it as a metaphor. For him it was literal. This is the cathedral. And the God that's flowing over the waterfalls and blasting down 3,000 feet, that God was constantly being revealed to him. This was not in the pattern of the potter, the potting wheel, and the pot, where the potter finishes the pot, creation, puts the pot on the shelf and says, there it is, whatever. And we and the beavers and the woodpeckers and the flickers that just came by, we're left to sort it out. Well, make the most of it, kid. I mean, there it is. You're in the pot. Or running around on the surface of the pot. And if it gets fired or not fired, whatever, there's the pot. Not my problem anymore. So this is a kind of a childish myth which continues to permeate what we call religion. But a creation which is of different essence and not of the nature of its creator is not a creation which can move. It doesn't develop either people or animals or aspen groves or watersheds. And if we come out here and experience it as Muir did, well, the potter setting a pot out on the shelf is a wonderful metaphor, and we still have potters who do exactly that on the potting wheel. But it's not a metaphor appropriate for nature, which is continual change. These aspens are 20 years old, they're appearing. These are 100 years old, they're splitting, falling down. We're being destroyed at the same time that we're being created. And there's a sustenance, a continuity, a nourishing influence that's also happening at the same time. There's a volcano, as a matter of fact, right underneath where we're standing, and it can go off at any time. There's no guarantee. There's no security. That's nothing but the expectation of your thought system. But then there's an intensity of observation, and that Muir and Burroughs and many others who were the beginning of the environmental movement, so-called in America, that's where they got it, being out here, observation. What actually happens here? I put my thoughts aside, all the ideas about God and what is sacred, not sacred, secular, profane, everything they indoctrinated me with growing up, if I put that aside, what happens? What's actually going on here? So that's the reason to be outdoors. Wilderness is the area where you are most likely to be able to develop your own relationship with the world which is unthought, not a product of your thought, nor the people around you, not a product of their thought, and not a product of the identification manuals either. Because when young especially, our mind takes readily to objective knowledge. So 175 species of birds in the Sierra Nevada, I'm going to identify every one of them and put down even the date, and where I found them and whatever. That's a certain amount of knowledge. What I'm interested in is your relationship with the world that the birds live in. What I'm interested in is your relationship with the world that the birds live in.